Hi, everybody. It's great to see a lot of faces on here that were at the in-person summit. As Julia said, my name is Greg Riley. I work with Rich Earth on a mix of tasks from operations, handling waste itself, and on the business and finance side as well. And I am excited to introduce the next session, which personally was one of my favorite sessions during the in-person summit. Um, and so, Researchers from Pepperdine University, University of North Carolina School of the Arts, and TERC, a nonprofit in Cambridge, Massachusetts, are collaborating on a National Science Foundation funded project to identify factors that affect the willingness of residents and municipalities to adopt alternative solutions to human waste management. In the current phase, the team of scientists, artists, education designers, and marketing experts are investigating how visualization design can contribute to expanding awareness. And with that, I will hand it now over to Martha, Nick, Betsy, Shawn, and Jolie. Thank you, everybody.
Hi all. Thank you so much. We've been looking forward to this moment for many months. You just heard Greg say some of our affiliations and our expertise, and you didn't hear experts in agriculture or um, you're in management. So what we're bringing is really research and thought around the messaging and the human dimension of adopting new solutions. So I want to say a couple words about the project, and then we'll have a chance to be a little bit more interactive as we move along. But essentially, I feel like I'm trapped in a Netflix special, in a series that keeps going with the same kind of trajectory. There's an innovation, there's some promising new development. It could make humans' quality of life better, it could make things better on our planet. And each time it runs into some powerful backlash. And this is the thing that I've been consumed with lately is how do we make sure that the next solutions that come through don't hit that they don't encounter the same resistance we saw for vaccines, that they don't encounter the same pushback that we see for wind energy. So too often there's an initiative, there's public comment period, and then there's resistance. And either the governing body sort of plows through and pushes on and ignores people's concerns, often they're legitimate, and that's problematic, or the whole thing is derailed, and that's problematic. So if we can figure out a way around that so that when all the amazing new alternative to flush toilets come to market, there's more curiosity and willingness to experiment. That would be a huge win, as far as I can tell. So trying to learn from the past, we spent some time thinking about the Six Americas. And if you've heard of that, maybe, and even if you haven't, you can imagine there's people along a whole spectrum from super alarmed, concerned, cautious to skeptical to convinced there's really nothing at all to think about. And for each of these, there are priorities and preferences so that when we're talking with them, it is helpful to remember what they care about so we can kind of tailor our messages. So as we've been thinking about where are the possibilities, where are the times, where are the occasions, where are the festivals, as we heard from Jen, I think from Sweden, or um, where people are maybe willing to try something a little different from what they have at home, um, then we want to be ready with a message that fits that moment and fits their priorities. So that is just kind of some of the premise and the framing for what we're doing. And then I want Betsy to talk to you a little bit more about where we've been locating some of our efforts and how, yeah, how things that are out of our control are shaping our project. So go, Betsy. Can't hear you yet. You're managing your slides.
There we
She's so
go.
much more visual.
How's that? Slides showing
Yeah.
sound?
Yeah, all good.
Wonderful. Well, greetings from sunny 60 degrees in North Carolina. And I'm just going to tag on to Martha's introduction to our team to say that I've been lucky enough to be a part of this art science design team for a number of different projects, from bats to butterflies to all kinds of science communication. And we got to this topic of toilets because of a personal need of mine, which was living half time in the treehouse where my partner lives full time. We needed a toilet and quickly found the lovable loo as a great solution for us. And my partner, who has spent lots of time on rivers using groovers, if that's familiar to anybody. There's a terrific podcast I can share about the history of the groover, but he likes to have a loo with a view. So this is our view from the loo. And you can see that this setting is a pretty good one for us to collect. It's very entirely feasible for us to collect 20 buckets and have the less aesthetic part of dumping them into our human manure hacienda. But when we started this project and getting people ready for new technologies, we really thought that what we would be working on was how to get people ready to have a kind of a very, very high-tech toilet like the kinds that are being funded by the Gates Foundation's Redesign the Toilet project. And our project was centered on Western North Carolina because it gave us a lot of the variety of types of people and types of places and types of challenges and opportunities to explore. And that project started in September of 2024, or maybe August of 2024. And in September 27th of that year, we had Hurricane Helene hit. So this is Hendersonville, which is the town, one of the two towns closest to the place where my treehouse home is and where our research study is. Similarly, more of you might be familiar with Asheville, North Carolina, a larger city, and the flooding and devastation that happened there, and that is ongoing, a cleanup that many of us hear about in the national news, led to places like hospitals coming up with solutions which in many ways are non-solutions, like this one for the absence of running water inside hospitals and other large buildings and institutions. And for folks at home to be flushing with buckets. At the same time, we were really unsure what was going on with wastewater treatment in Western North Carolina. Also, recently we just heard about 25% being a national average of how many septic systems are in use, but North Carolina is one of the two highest states for septic system use, and we have about 50%. And so imagine that in this wooded and rural community with extreme high water comes spillover from septic systems. So this sort of solution of flushing does seem like a solution from inside the house, but outside the house, it may very well not be a solution. So we found ourselves kind of strangely and unexpectedly right back at where we had started, of seeing a kind of lovable loo or toilet-based system being the solution that many were promoting for homes without toilets for 2 weeks, a month, 2 months. And so there we are back at a kind of lovable loo. And so our project shifted direction in a number of ways. And we started really investing in thinking about the twin bucket system, which increasingly felt like a very important technology to make sure many people know about for emergencies, but also we think of it as a kind of gateway drug for urine diversion and for alternatives and for different ways of thinking about toileting. So very often when you look for emergency toilets, you get kind of hazmat slanted graphics. And we were really much more interested by the kind of graphics that are coming out of Flush, for example, that suggest, right, thank you, Marilee, and many here on this call for doing such a more positive and provocative introduction. But what we've also found is that as we engage with emergency managers and city managers, that there's an obstacle, and that is that when the buckets fill up, the emergency managers run out of ways to tell you like what to do in an emergency. And so right now, our project is really interested in learning from the remarkable collection of wisdoms in the room here to think about how do we how do we get at like what are some solutions for full buckets? And how do we go about communicating those solutions for full buckets in ways that people across those different Americas, across those different spectra, would be interested in adopting? And so at that point, I turn it over to Jolie to talk a little bit more about audiences, and I'll stop sharing and look forward to learning from you all in the last half of this session.
All right. Thank you so much, Betsy. So, yeah, so I'm delighted to be working on this project as well. And one of my areas that I come in from is really like go-to-market strategies and also marketing strategies, like more from a strategic point of view. So one of the things I'd like to talk to you about is as you think about your projects, to really think about your target audience. And Martha was really talking about that a little bit at the beginning. So some of the research tells us about adoption of sustainable solutions by different types of people in America. But we can even get closer when we're starting to look at emergency management. So who is it that we want to talk to when we're thinking about disaster preparation messaging? And what we see, as I said before, is that it's not one size fits all, right? So a message that is very compelling to one type of person might not be compelling to somebody else. And in order to develop that sort of compelling messaging, you do need to speak to those people and understand like what is their needs, what are their buttons, what are things that you can really relate to them that get them to engage with your message and get them curious and want to try. So in the context of this, on the next slide, on the context of this, we kind of broke down for this particular emergency management three different types of people that we might talk to. So the first one might be who are the professionals, right? Who are emergency managers, public health boards, septic inspectors, and what are some of the things that are on their minds? What is it that you need to address when you're talking to them? So some of the things that we heard was as Betsy said, how do we handle the hauling and disposal? You know, we've got the buckets now. We're not really quite sure what to do. So there needs to be some messaging around that. What about regulatory reform, right? And how do we make it easy and cost efficient, right? So these are the kind of things those are the types of things that are on their mind that in order to get their attention, we need to include that into our messaging. So on the next slide, we go on to potential leaders. Leaders are people within within the community who might have influence that people might go to for advice. And so these might be faith leaders, they could be healthcare leaders, they could be other community leaders. And so that people are saying, like, these people are flocking to me, and like, what do I offer? So their biggest concern is not like, what do I do myself, but rather like, how do I communicate this easily? What can you give me to communicate easily to people who are coming to me for advice, right? So we need to think about that these are people who are, you would say, almost like influencers. Like, how do we get them to influence other people, to guide other people? What kind of information, what kind of messaging do they need? Moving on to our next one, we would have some people who we might call from the users. You have people who might be early adopters, those people who are easier to get to adopt to this bucket system. So somebody who might be a survivalist, right? You know, they're ready for all sorts of emergencies. Interestingly enough, they're often not really ready with a toilet, so they haven't not yet thought about that. But they might be the people who say, like, we're going to have to go. How do I prep? You know, just tell me what to do, and I'm ready to do it. And then you have outdoor recreationalists who are used to going outside, and so they're basically saying like, is fine for a day or two, but then what do I do? So they're a little bit more open, and you can start building on that openness in terms of your communication. Okay, so does anybody know some of these type of people and can imagine them, what they might say with a introduction to a bucket during an emergency? You can put your comments into the chat. Would love to hear about any of these people who you might have encountered or who you might think would react in a certain way. Okay, with that, I will pass it on to Nick, who is going to talk a little bit about messaging and how we might design messaging in a very effective way once you've decided who your target group is.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, you heard from my colleagues, Martha, Betsy, and Jolie, kind of how we got into the project and how we got to where we are. And in somewhat unexpected ways, we are at the point where we're responding to a need for emergency solutions, and at the same time thinking about how do we get these messages across. And so I want to take a few minutes and share with you a few guidelines that we have developed as part of other work that also finds a very good home in the Flushette project as well. And one of the kind of paradoxical realizations is we were going through the work and kind of approaching the point where we're right now is that what's happening with our kind of waste management needs under emergency situations is a bit of a shocking paradox that doesn't have a lot of parallels in other examples. So consider this, if you are driving your car, you get a flat, generally you have a compressor or a spare tire, where you can stop a fellow motorist and they're going to help you with this, right? So you can sort of foresee how something bad would happen. You have a solution for that. We're all quite used to this for different reasons. If there is an electrical problem, if it's something portable and small and temporary, you would have a few batteries around the house. If it's something bigger, like you want to run the fridge or your, I don't know, TV streaming favorite platform, you would start up the generator. But the point is that we are prepared for what happens when there's no electricity in our life. And kind of on a even more, extreme cases, like if your toaster catches on fire or there is a fire, it's actually regulated. You need to have smoke and carbon monoxide and dioxide detectors in your house, and that's code. That's not even up to you to decide if you want it or not. And likewise with fire extinguishers. And so we can kind of continue this logic, and yet the shocker for us, all of us on the project, was like, well, what happens when your toilet falls apart and for whatever reason it doesn't work anymore? What are our options? And as Betsy pointed out, just over a year ago, we got to really experience it firsthand in Western North Carolina, around Hendersonville and Asheville. And so to reiterate the point, but in sort of visual ways, so the solution that we find is a bucket, and I've tried to follow the conversation in the chat. I wasn't able to quite keep up with it, but I personally really like the idea of a bucket. I mean, it's very straightforward. It's very easy to understand. It actually sounds funny as well. But it turns out that it's not one bucket, it's two buckets, and it's really important. And again, this was an interesting realization for all of us from experience and from reading the materials, that it's really important you separate pee and poo in those buckets. And as we have heard this referred a number of times for a number of years, this is the magical twin bucket system. And so in this kind of brief visual introduction, to reiterate some of the points and messages that my colleagues made, we used a series of design principles, and I'm sharing with you 3 here, which I would like to expand on a little bit, but they're part of about 8 that we had formalized in our work that help us develop, design, fine-tune, and spread kind of purpose and case specific messages for specific audiences, as Jolie pointed out. And so the ones that stick out the most, I think that are most helpful, are, keep in mind that they need to be narrative driven. We find functional minimalism to be really helpful in designing these in whatever modality of communication it is, and also to use symbolic semiotic language that is kind of custom specific to the content that we're developing. So here's a little bit more about this. So just in the few minutes and slides that I've shared with you, notice that I didn't just come and say, like, yo, you should just use 2 buckets, whether they're containers or buckets, one for poop. Yes, from a point of knowledge and experience, that makes sense, but it's actually more convincing to people to be like, hey, have you thought about this? So you make a provision in your life for all of these emergency scenarios, but not what happens with your toilet when it stops working. So the argument is this kind of like a narrative arc is more relatable, more convincing, more effective when we communicate that message. In terms of functional minimalism, the magic message there is less is more. And this is really difficult, particularly with me coming from a kind of research and academic background. Is like, if you know this stuff, you just want to share it all. Like, how could it be bad? And yet, we have demonstrated here in just those few slides and minutes, focus on what's important. Like the toilet is broken. You don't have to describe it. You don't have to put all the reference articles in this specific slide. And of course, you can use different visual modalities to make your point. I recognize that I am here with the slides, so you're looking as I'm talking. And so that sets a certain visual style and dynamic for the presentation. Obviously, if I'm handing you a piece of paper and it's something you take home and you have to read, this would not be sufficient, and there would be sort of a different design perspective. And to that point, here is one of our favorite documents that we have used in the past years. These are folks from Portland, Oregon. So here is a document where if you really want to understand about emergency toilet, about different methods, you have about 9 or 10 pages to read. This is very appropriate for that kind of interaction. Yet, if we're running some kind of a makeshift field-operated toilet and folks are coming in and are like, I really need to go. What do I need to do here? It might be more appropriate to just hand something even more condensed, more minimal, and ideally more effective. So here's the twin bucket system again. We might want to have like some kind of a catchy title that sets up the expectations. And there's basically two rules, a set of rules. Like if you're peeing, you do this. And if you're pooping, you do this. And by the way, if you're done and it's been a positive or effective experience, like, would you please share the message? So there could be like a takeout message as well. And in terms of the symbolism as design principle, so I've already shared a few examples of this, but I want to remind you that we're quite used as global citizens to different symbolic systems. So this is a little bit more advanced and developed in Europe out of necessity. There are at least 27 languages there. So obviously you can't be typing on your no passing sign in English, no passing, because 90% of the countries would not be able to read it, right? And so here's an example. This is not optional. You actually have to go to school. You have to pass a test. And if you don't follow them, you're going to get fined. And eventually you're going to lose your license and automobile privileges if you don't follow them. Here's another one, which is a little bit more playful, yet has a long history, right? So these are the Olympic Games pictographs. They are carefully developed. Each country kind of takes pride in the visual style. And they're very helpful when you want to follow, like, I don't know, about 27 or so different sports during the Olympic Games. And increasingly, but in the last couple of decades, we've been exposed to increasingly usage of the emoji system. And here's our happy poop emoji in the middle. And what we pointed out on Cape Cod is, well, where's the pee emoji? And so we're really looking for excited, motivated volunteers to help us bring this discrepancy to an end so that pee and poop happily stay together in the emoji set. And just to take this a little bit further and kind of in a fun context, as we were developing some of these materials and researching, we came across another interesting trivia and paradox, right? So when you think about poop, as we decided, the bucket is a container, or explicitly as the bucket, sort of an iconic object, right? So we know its volume in the two metric and imperial systems. We know its dimensions. So we can ask the questions like, well, how much does a person poop in 24 hours? And so if you put this in a bucket, we realize that it takes about 75 people to fill this up. Okay, so we're going to clean the slate a little bit. So what happens if we're not just composting and putting poop? What if we are actually pooping in a toilet and capturing all of that in a bucket? So it turns out if you flush and it goes in the 5-gallon bucket, it takes about 6 people to do that. Well, interesting paradox. So one of the most advanced buildings, the current record holder for the tallest building in the world, is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. And here's an actual photograph of what it looks like. So imagine half a mile worth of a building sitting there. It looks stunning from every direction in any part of the day. So again, the record holder at 825 meters. It costs about $1.5 billion. It is designed to operate with about 10,000 users daily in its different areas and floors. And it turns out that if those 10,000 people sort of have the normal output of their flushing toilets, they would fill about 1,666 5-gallon buckets. So it's kind of interesting. If you stack that many buckets on top of each other, you're going to end up with almost the height of Burj Khalifa. Here's the shocker for all of us, and I know some folks have heard this, but increasingly we find out that folks don't. Okay, Burj Khalifa is not hooked up to the sewer system of the city. We can talk about what the reasons are. So every day they have to fill individual trucks, and it takes anywhere from 7 to 12 daily to haul all of that stuff out. I mean, this is sort of the story of legends. Like here's an example of what that train of trucks looks like. So how does it happen that one of the most advanced, wealthiest places in the world and this kind of iconic building of prosperity and technological innovation has not figured out how to do this better than essentially trucking the sewage every single day? Anyway, but symbolism can be very effective in telling these kind of interesting stories in a memorable, exciting way that opens conversations and discussions. And so that's what we're hoping that in the time that we have remaining, we can do. And I'm going to let Shawn take over and set us up for this activity that we have in mind.
Thanks so much, Nick. And it's such a joy to be with the Rich Earth Summit again. Many years coming. So good to see so many people and so exciting to see so much energy in the chat. I know we've been going like gangbusters because we really wanted to get through this content. So we could invite you, really turn it over to the community and take advantage of all of this amazing knowledge and enthusiasm that's out here in our community. So just to like let all of that absorb, let's just take a breath together. So we talked to you a little bit about who we are, what our orientation is, how our focus shifted based on Hurricane Helene and discovering emergency management as an issue. And as we've been talking about in the chat, talking to emergency managers who were like, we don't know what to do. Like we want to give people buckets, but we don't know what to do, as Carol said, in month 2. And we want to understand your ideas now of thinking about this situation. Who are the audiences, like Jolie talked about, that we're going to want to make outreach to? And then what's that outreach going to look like? How can we take some of what Nick shared about narrative, functional minimalism, and symbolism in order to design messaging that really gets this out there? So you see on the screen, and I know it's not shared full blown because I actually want you to see the side, that in small groups in just a moment, you're going to work with your partners, 2 or 3 partners, to answer these questions, right? A disaster has happened and you're up shit creek, now what? So with your group together, what is your plan to manage your system as buckets fill? Yeah, we can make a few days without having to do much, and then maybe we've got some bags, maybe, and then from there, what starts to happen? Maybe the roads are blocked, and so what the Burj Khalifa is doing is not possible, or maybe it is. You decide your particular scenario. If you have questions about like, where are we? What's the exact circumstances? You go ahead and make them up and go with it. Say yes to your partners. All right, so what's going to be your plan to manage that system as the buckets fill? And who do you need to be on board in advance about this plan, right? Who are some of the people or a person or a group of people that you're going to want to talk to about this beforehand? Are they regulators? Are they legislators? Are they community leaders of faith or neighborhood leaders, mutual aid groups? Your decision. And what's the main message that this audience needs to hear? What's your big hook, your headline, or your bullseye? Something that's going to appeal to a developer, a real estate developer, might be different from what's going to appeal to your local emergency manager, for example, or your local healthcare leader. So what's the big message you're going to want to target with them first, and then the details can come later. If you get there, what is the medium to deliver this big idea? Do you want to reach this person via a big billboard or a radio ad on a particular show you know they listen to? Do you want to come into their office and visit them? Or is it a fact sheet you're going to present, or stickers that are on your buckets? Whatever option you want to come up with. And if you have the time, use some symbols, narratives, or other design ideas to help bring this idea to life. You can make notes or sketch a draft. And we've got a ton of icons down here and other fact sheet examples that Betsy has done such an amazing job of pulling together. So when you come into your groups, I'm going to share this Google Drive, or this Google PowerPoint with you now. And your breakout room has a special slide that has been dictated for you. So if you are in group 1 when the breakout rooms begin, then go ahead, head over to slide 1. You can keep that information there that's already on the screen and just answer it. Or you can also add another slide. It's kind of your slides now, right? But group 2's slide is here. Group 3 is there. Group 4 is there. I haven't been following the chat because I've been talking. Are there questions from the group about what's about to happen? We've got about 20 minutes, I would say, to work, and then we'll have about 10 minutes to debrief. So what are some solutions to our emergency plan once our buckets are full? Or if you have a different idea that's not container-based, curious to hear that too. And then begin to flesh out some of how communication might work to get people on board for that. All right. Betsy, are we ready to open the breakout rooms? All right, let her rip. And we'll stay in here. If anyone has questions or thoughts, I'm going to stop my share.
Right. I mean, it would be great. I don't know if I can pull up slides. If groups have a slide that you'd like us to look at, or Shawn, there you are. If you want to take over for key takeaways, I'd be glad to pull up slides or glad to just hear report backs. What do you think, Shawn? You want to walk us through the groups? Oh,
I think his audio is not working.
okay.
And jump in. So my group 2, I don't know, I will not be able to name everybody who was there, but we had a good rousing discussion about some different ways we could at least plant the seeds and get people thinking about having an emergency plan before there's an emergency. And thank you. I think it was Nick who said there are in some communities a poo crew forming. In a summer camp situation. And if you're on the poo crew, you'd maybe be in charge of making sure everybody had what they needed. That could even be carbon material or toilet paper. And there might be also some labor involved, but maybe we can make it sort of a sexy sort of assignment, a cool assignment. And then we just started talking about how we would like some celebrity type of person who appeals to both the left and the right ideologically, or maybe we need to, who could start a conversation in communities about just having a buddy system for this, thinking about where we might want to have a pilot, starting to educate people about what would make our fecal material safe enough to use in a garden situation, or how long it takes to compost, blah, 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 blah. So just some highlights from that conversation as they struck me.
Great. And was that was group 1, Martha?
I think I was 2, actually.
Okay, is there someone from group 1 who has some highlights to share or would like me to project anything?
And or we would really talked about this is a limited time, so more than a report back, just like, where is the sticking point now, or where does the breakthrough feel like it might happen? Anything process-wise is also welcome in this part.
Yeah. Feel free to just jump in. I'll call to group 3 and see anyone group 3.
Hey, Carol, you want to share from our group?
Oh, were we group 3?
Yes, we were group 3.
Okay. We stepped at the practical before getting to the fun stuff. So we first would talk to first responders, emergency personnel, ask what they think would work or what they envision was the plan, since it is their job and they will be looked to as the authorities and guardians of public health. We'll also advise on alternatives if needed. Like if they say, well, just a bucket will be fine, right? For a few weeks. Since we're all experts on that, then we'll partner with first responders to identify networks, channels, target audiences, such as community-based groups, CERT, community emergency response training programs, seniors, faith-based group, churches, etc., to figure out how we get the message out. And we'll create a plan with authorities for the excreta management, which kind of goes back to two, such as if there's a long-term emergency, community composting collection sites, we'll identify those sites and who's responsible. That won't be a small thing. And other practices, like in my San Francisco area community, you thought you were going to dig a hole. That wasn't going to be easy for apartment dwellers. Then we'll organize community presentations and ideally form a community task force type group to deploy all of this messaging and get everyone on board. And maybe we'll use community-based social marketing techniques to promote best practices. And then perhaps like a neighbor-to-neighbor type way of getting the word out and showing your neighbors what emergency response kits and practices there are. And I see probably Tatiana, a front porch forum in Vermont, local town newsletters, that sort of thing. And then we would consult the fun stuff that the previous group came up with for messaging and perhaps making it a more fun framing of the challenge.
And I think one thing that came up in our group as well from Tatiana, or actually from both Tatiana and Carol, was the need to maybe have some narrative and storytelling to these first responders who might not have had a disaster in their area and had to deal with this situation of, oh, well, we don't, this is what happened in places where they hadn't thought about this beforehand, right? So a little bit of narratives of, hey, what happens when you don't think about that, to get people engaged?
We might have time for one or two more folks to speak back. Yeah, Marilee.
Group 5 has slide number 26. Can you bring that up?
Sure.
Slide 26, yeah.
This
yeah. I think there was a divide between communicating about composting versus communicating about bags of poop lining the poo bucket. And of course, we would all advocate in a perfect world for composting the products, but containment is easier, and transport is easier if they are bagged. In Portland, the emergency managers used to get apoplectic about the idea of putting bags of poop in roll carts for storage. And now they accept that, but insist the carts must not be put at the curb for pickup. And the emergency managers are squeamish about contaminating garbage trucks with poop. Garbage trucks that carry dog poop in bags, and
and diapers, tons of diapers.
And thank you, diapers. Yes.
By the million,
yeah. Landfills full of diapers. Yeah.
So, but what I had heard is that if a bed, like the separate villa has buckets lined with a compostable bag, and you can close it up on the top so nobody touches anything, and then you're allowed to put it in the garbage can because it's just like a diaper. I mean, we want to compost and use it, but you can just put it in because that's what diapers are, right? All the
Right.
adult diapers. I
Yeah.
mean, they say you have to scrape the poop off. Can you believe that? That anybody's going to do that in a
Yeah.
hospital with
Yeah.
hundreds of people pooping
Yeah.
in diapers, and they're going to scrape it off? And then what? It's still contaminated.
Yeah.
So you can just put it in the garbage.
Well, so
Emergency.
many amazing ideas. Thank you for sharing those with us, and we look forward to connecting with you all in the future. And Shawn may have a word of closing for us.
Yeah, I feel like as soon as I I hadn't heard adult diapers come up the whole conference, and once it does, it's about time to start wrapping up. We're getting to the closing time. I know we still have one more session, so it's not actually the closing time, but I did just want to point to how much magic happens when we all put our minds together and put all this energy. It's a room that is at once both really small in the global context and also really large, and the amount of energy that we can create and the amount of wisdom we have. So I hope this is just the beginning of the conversation. We'd love to talk with folks more if there are people who want to continue to engage in this issue. And we'd love to continue to work on communication and figuring out how to spread messages of all the work that we're all doing to reach more and more people so that it can continue to grow exponentially. Thanks everybody so much.